Hey, how we doing, cadets? Sergeant Major Clark here. We're going to get a period of instruction today on the proper press of your camouflage utility cover and the proper press of your camouflage utility uniform. In order to get our uniforms pressed, we need a couple of items to start off with. Number one, I need an ironing board. The ironing board that you purchase from the store is going to come with a cotton and easy and smooth pressing type cover. However, the longer you use these covers, if you don't take them off and wash them, starch and flakes from your iron are going to build up. So I would always recommend that whatever type of ironing board cover you have, that you take it off and wash it as many times as you possibly can. If you don't, then what I would recommend is that you go out and buy an ironing board cover that has a protective layer on it that you can easily wipe off any excess starch or any residue from your ironing board. These are not that expensive, and it would save you a couple of bucks in the long run in order to prevent damage to the iron and prevent damage to your uniforms. In order to get started, what we're also going to need is an old towel that you don't mind getting dirty, and that was specifically for spraying your uniforms. The iron that I would recommend that you purchase when pressing prior to pressing military uniforms, is an iron that has a Teflon coating. That Teflon is going to prevent searing, and it's going to prevent you from burning your uniforms if you're paying attention to all the settings properly. You can use an iron that has a solid metal or titanium bottom to it, but I always recommend against it. If you do use the other type, then you're going to need to use a lower setting to prevent from burning your uniforms. You're going to start off, before we get started, you're also going to need an old school rag or a hand towel, and this will come into play with specifically when we got into pressing our covers. The two things that you're going to need specifically are starch or magic sizing. Now, if you are not comfortable using spray starch, if you are not the cadet who is pressing their church clothes or their dress clothes before a work interview, and you are not familiar with using starch, I would recommend starting off with magic sizing. And there are other brands of sizing. I like magic sizing. It is a light body type spray that's going to prevent flaking, and it's going to prevent clogging of the pores in your iron. This is an easier and lighter weight spray. It'll still it'll still spray nice and smooth, and it'll hold a decent press like starch will, but magic sizing, the press and the creases don't last as long as if you were to use starch. But again, this is a great starting point for anyone who's not familiar with pressing or spraying their uniforms, and then you can move on to spray starch. The brand of starch is up to you. Faultless is a good brand that you can purchase from Walmart. This is just good old heavy starch from the Dollar Tree. And then Niagara and some of these starches come with different fragrances, lemon, and other types. It really doesn't matter whether it's got a smell to it or not. So let's get busy. The first thing we're going to do is lay out our towel on our ironing board so that all of that excess starch that we're spraying on our uniforms doesn't soak in to the cotton fabric on our ironing board. Because if it does, and then we go to press that uniform on the ironing board, that wet starch is going to stick to the iron and the ironing board, and it's going to cause damage to both the ironing board, your iron, but more importantly, your uniforms. So today we're going to start with our cover. Now I'm going to go through spraying all of your camouflage utility uniforms now, and then when we come back after everything completely dries, we'll get into the actual press of the uniform. So I am very familiar with what I'm doing, so I'm going to go ahead and start using starch. When you, go ahead and zoom in here, when you have a starch bottle, you've got a red tab on the bottle and a red tab on the nozzle. You want to make sure that red nozzle lines up with the red tab so that you get an even flow of spray. So I'm going to shake it up real good, and I'm just going to get nasty with it. I'm going to spray as much as I feel comfortable all over the cover. Now it's kind of wet and gross. I'm going to go ahead and rub it in. Don't worry about it. You can wash your hands when you get done. Once you rub it in, I'm going to go ahead and soak the remainder of the cover. So much so that it is about to run off of the cover. Once I get all of the starch rubbed in, I'm going to continue to move my cover around, manipulating the fabric. I want to pay special attention to the cardboard bill. Never fold this bill in half. There's actual cardboard inside, and you'll snap it down the middle. When we get into the actual press of the cover, we'll talk about more in length how to protect that bill and round it off. Again, this is not a snap back Yankees baseball cover. You don't wear it with a flat bill. Once I've gotten the entirety of the cover, I'm going to go around the sweatband one more time until it's soaking wet. I'm not worried about whether the starch rolling off is going to get all over anything because I got my towel down to protect it. Now, a lot of times young people are prone to sweaty glands through puberty and acne and things like that. I would not recommend going too thorough on the inside with the starch, because it's gonna, if you have allergies, or not allergies, if you are allergic to anything that is in these chemicals, then you run the risk of your head getting broken out. So that's it. I'm gonna spray everything down. Once I'm done, I'm gonna let my cover hang dry. Now, me personally, because I'm very comfortable with this, I would come back once I've got it all rubbed in and it's starting to dry already. I'm going to come back with even one more light coat of spray, and I'm going to rub it in one more time. Make sure that it's even. Make sure you have no dry spots on this cover at all whatsoever. Once I'm done, I'm going to let it hang dry. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my blouse. Me personally, I start with my sleeves first. I'm going to unbutton all my buttons, unvelcro all of my pockets on the blouse. Now I'm going to start with the sleeves. Now, here's what I'll tell you. Depending on the season, whether sleeves up or sleeves down, it doesn't matter. I'm still putting starch on my sleeves. And when you get to the video on rolling your sleeves, you'll understand why it's important to have starch in your sleeves, and that your sleeves are pressed before you actually roll them. Now, I'll also say in the summer, when my sleeves are up, I'll use a little less starch on my sleeves than I do the remainder of the blouse, but not much. So I'm going to start off with pressing underneath my pockets. So I'm going to get in and spray my starch up underneath the pocket. Spray in my pocket. Very much like my cover, I'm going to evenly coat that sleeve with starch. Go ahead and rub everything in to where it's nice and smooth. Take a look at your sleeve to make sure you've got no dry patches and that the spray is going on evenly across the sleeve. Now I'm going to pop open the top where my crease would be at the top of that blouse. And I'm going to put an extra layer of starch underneath the corner pockets of my blouse. And then I'm running a heavy layer of starch right down the seam. Flip it over. I'm going to get the back side of the sleeve. Again, all the way across, even flow of spray, until your blouse is white like Christmas time. I got a little bit of a dry patch here, so I'm going to go back over it and rub it in. I would do the same thing for the other sleeve. Make sure that you rub that starch in. If you don't and it dries without you rubbing it in, you run the risk of having white flakes on your uniform before you even get started pressing it. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to spray my collar. I'm going to go underneath the back side of that collar. I'm going to spray it down. Now, one thing I want to focus on is the corners and the folds of your collar in the front. You want to make sure that you put an excessive amount so that you've got a nice sharp crease when you go to press your uniform. I'm going to flip the blouse on the front side. I'm going to press the front of my collar. A little bit more on the crease. Rub it in. I'm going to spray the back side as well. And then you have to make sure that you get your shoulders. A lot of people forget about that. So I'm going to even out my blouse on the iron. I've got my towel underneath. And I'm going to soak down the back side, making sure I get all the way up to the seams. And an even coat of starch. Once I rub this in, I'm going to slide it over and do the other side of the back of the blouse. I'm going to skip that for now, just so we can move along with the video. Once I got the entirety of the back of the blouse done, I'm going to slide the corners of my shoulder over the ironing board, and I'm going to spray down my shoulders. And then get the upper back of the blouse where your tag is. Once I got both shoulders done and the entirety of the back done, I'm going to lay the front of the blouse on my ironing board. Spray underneath my pockets first. Now I'm spraying from the shoulders all the way down. I love the sizzle, the sound of the sizzle that the starch makes when it hits the fabric. Gets me motivated. From here, I would take the blouse, put the other side over, and continue to spray the remainder of the blouse. Once your blouse is soaking wet and you've rubbed the entire blouse down and gotten the starch rubbed in, just let it hang dry. Depending on the temperature in the house or whether you've got it underneath an AC vent or not will determine how long it takes to dry. What I often do is I'll set them out on the front porch on a hanger, or I'll drape them at the front of my window and then open the blinds and let the sun dry it. So from here, I'm going to spray my camouflage utility trousers. The first thing that I like to do on my trousers as well is unbutton all my buttons so that I can spray underneath the pockets. So I personally start with my cargo pocket, and I'm going to open up the folds on the inside of the flaps in my cargo pocket. I'm going to spray down the insides. From there, I'm spraying the entirety of the blouse. As you work, trousers. Rub everything in. Now, up in this area where it's all bunched up with the elastic, you're going to have to stretch it out and get the fabric nice and flat. From here, I'm laying out that crease on the top. Much like the sleeve on my blouse, I'm going to soak down the crease, or where the crease is supposed to be, on my camouflage trousers. Making sure that if I've got any dry spots, I come back over it. I'm going to flip my trousers over to the back side, making sure that I don't forget about that inner seam. Much like the front, I'm going to soak down where the crease is supposed to be with a little bit extra starch. And then soak the remainder of the blouse as you work. Trousers, done that twice already. I would do the exact same thing for the other side of the trousers. I'm going to take my trousers and hang them back up to dry. Once they're dry, then I'm going to come back with a steam iron and press my trousers. I will caution you to make sure that your trousers are completely dry, that your blouse is completely dry before you get to pressing your uniforms. All right, when we come back, all the camouflage utility uniforms will be dry and we'll get busy on pressing our uniforms.